Hello, everybody. We are waiting for Chezi's tea, and then we'll begin.
Hello, good afternoon.
How are you doing?
Chazi and his tea have arrived. It's funny. They're like, so the countdown is 30 seconds. But, when you think of 30 seconds and you're counting it down, you're like, this is so much time. Like, when the bomb's about to go off, you're like, I definitely have enough time to, make it out of the building.
Yeah.
Think about this when my son was counting something, and I was counting a minute, and he wanted to know, really what that meant. And he's like, this is taking forever. And I was like, yeah, it's taking a long time if I'm counting it by the seconds. But evidently, it still wasn't enough time to go second away into the kitchen and make my tea in time. So I guess you live and learn.
Yeah.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm doing good. It was a lot. I've been in a bunch of conversations. This weekend was like the Hasidic New Year.
Oh, yeah. Okay, right.
It was a big thing, yeah, in the Chabad that I go to. That was interesting. It was cool.
This is the day the rabbi was released from prison, and famous author of the Tanya, which you and Jacob are studying together. Jenny? So that you and him are learning together, and I think even he was on didn't he do like a live stream where him and Max?
I saw something. Yeah, that was I saw the pictures of it. It was funny.
He is an interesting character.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him dancing. I'm gonna get my glasses.
Sure.
But I saw him dancing in person. So, Jacob, when we went to after the during the conference in Chino, we went to a Friday night dinner at the local Chabad, and that was fun.
That's nice. Okay, I'm glad to hear that went. You guys enjoyed yourself there. Second, why did it just crash? Okay, it didn't crash. Yafeh me'od. And
how are you doing? How was your weekend and all the stuff going on?
Good. Very nice weekend. My in-laws are back in, so that was very nice to have them back over here. Generally speaking, a good week. Things are sort of moving up. I said last week, I had a client come. Now that client left, but it was very nice to have them over here. They were very happy. They felt, it was like a very good fit. Also, the client and the house together. There was a very good meld when that happens, and they're happy, and I'm happy. It was like a very nice full circle sort of closure sort of element to it, which was very very nice. My partner was gone for 2 weeks, so that was a little stressful. He came back, which I gave him a very big hug. Very happy.
How long usually are those the cycles with clients?
How long is it? How long from start to finish? Am I with a client?
Yeah.
Roughly, generally speaking, like a year. It's almost always 3 months worth of planning. And planning till we're ready to bid. So, converting the plans into work plans and into renders and into carpentry plans and into specs and into bid books and then going out to tender. So that's usually 3 months. If a client is really on top of his game and answers right away, it could be 2 months. And then the process depends on the scope of the project. Usually runs between 8 months to a year, and much larger projects longer and smaller projects less. But unfortunately, we tend to get involved in very complicated projects. This big house, I want to build it over 5 years and split permits, or I want to dig down a few floors but there's a water cistern, so we're going to have to like divert the water. Like it's never just like, I just would like a new kitchen. So sometimes you get that, and that's great. But on the other hand, where those kind of projects, you get to, there's a tremendous amount of experience and like learning curve over there, and you really get to work with fantastic pros. And so ultimately, I'm thankful for those projects. They're very demanding.
Yeah. No, it sounds
I tell
like
people the design is the easy part.
Yeah. Well, the design is it's in its own world. It doesn't touch many things, or there's less dependencies and all that stuff. I mean, to an extent, but yeah.
We have we have a lot of students, interns, first year architects, people reach out to the office and for a job position.
Yeah.
And there's been times where we were a larger staff, times where we were smaller, but when I do interview people, I usually give them the window treatment or the curtain test, as you see over here, right? So there's I show them a large window. I tell them, how would you go about picking this fabric? And so people tell me like, oh, like what mood, what color, what is it flowy, is it not flowy? I'm like, all those questions, they're all down the line. I'm like, how much does the fabric weigh? Is the sun in that direction, and will it affect the curtain? Is there what kind of support do I need to put into the ceiling? Then I'll start and how long is it going to take for that fabric to come in, and how does that affect the timeline of the project? After all that's accounted for, yeah, we could discuss the color, Cheryl. Like, now is the time where we could say like, how's it going to look? But like, if it wasn't the right weight, it's no point. And if it wasn't going to come in on time, there's no point. And if it wasn't in the budget, there's no point. But there's like sort of a way how you look at it, because I don't want to dive too much into that. That's like very like business chesed.
Yeah.
It's its own Torah. We'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All right. So we were at number 6. Oh, last week we did number 6.
Yeah.
Yossi spoke about whoever honors the Torah and is honoring himself. Whoever is desecrating the Torah, or here it says denigrates the Torah, is denigrating himself. And we gave a whole breakdown of different versions of how we see what respecting other people is. What is a desecration, and when are you doing this desecration? Generally speaking, though, as we could see here, we'll see in the future, and as we've seen in the past, the Torah, I'm going to mention this also at the Noahide class with regards to intentions, because there's things that let's say Noahides are not required, and one of them is called like shiurim, like these small details, right? So while the Torah expects this from all humankind, specifically from the Jews, or let's say it's priestly class, intentionality, where your mind is, what you're doing, is super, super important. So like, we spoke about that, even if you did something by mistake, the fact that there was a desecration, you should have been aware of your actions regardless. Like, it doesn't sort of matter if it's a mistake. Like, yes, you're not an evil person, but that still needs to be rectified. And let's say for a Noahide, in a certain extent, like if it was by accident, then like no harm, nothing bad happened. Yeah. But in a certain sense, even if a Jew makes a mistake, that could be taken care of, but there has to be some sort of rectification, because like there's a balance was shaken, was undone. And that's because the Torah sort of requires, and this obviously relates to Tanya as well, what you guys were talking about this week about the emanations, and talking about like how, the things you do over here have ripples to, different realms, different spheres, so to speak. Yeah. All of them are one. They're interconnected. So I'm just talking about this, even this little verse over here, which is why the Torah is, very, very adamant about us acting and behaving well, and our intentions being aligned as well. So
Yeah.
it's a recurring theme, of course.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me. So this might be like a separate point, but it kind of reminds me of a recent, in a recent parasha, talking about Jacob and the birthright. No, Jacob, sorry, and the blessings, and how I think it was one specific commentary saying again that he was correct. He was right in what he did, in terms of getting the blessings. But there was still, if you follow the story as it evolves, there are still consequences to be
Big time.
to be met, right? Like in terms of Laban and him being tricked, and obviously Esav and the whole relationship, and he has to flee, right? So that's the immediate effect. Even if we take into account that he was right, that was what he was supposed to do. Still, the consequences kind of lay themselves out. So, and it's something to consider. Probably also in terms of Shimon Velevi, in terms of what you do has consequences. So, yeah, you should use that tool wisely. Or yeah.
Just to add on what you said, because that was a very good like insight bringing that in over here. But definitely, that decision haunts Jacob for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. And from, like you said, with Laban telling him about his daughters, right? He says, "B'mekomenu lo nahukach," as in where we come from, we don't do this. And it's sort of like a dig saying like where we come from, like, I know the kind of tomfoolery you were up to, stealing stuff and swapping with your brothers. Like, we're not going to do any of that. Right. So that's already a dig that he has to deal with. Of course, everything he has to deal with while he's there, the double years he's working. But I mean, obviously, just according to many of the sages, his whole battle with the angel / the representative of Esau / his guilt / his subconscious, all this is because, like, even though it was the right thing, he had to struggle and wrestle through all that. So, and even with Simon and Levi, Jacob ultimately, I mentioned this in the 5-6 minute recording I do, but how when he's talking to Joseph, he's obviously happy that his sons conquered. Like, he was okay with the conquest in a certain extent of like part of the promise that God gave them. But then when he's talking to them individually, giving them their blessings, like the way you went about it, like, you embarrassed me. It was cruel. So there's the mode of how things are done. And then there's obviously like what eventually happens at the end of the day, and how we look at those things from like a grand scale. I would go as so far to say that even Israel, that Jacob, obviously, that our Jacob wrestles with, so what I did there, Jacob. Even there, like when we look at Zionism or Israel, which he has issues with, right? All that could also be like the means and the way it happened doesn't necessarily, like, it's not the end of the story yet, and we're not there where like how we have the opportunity to constantly improve that and learn from our mistakes. But Jacob started with like a swap, right? That wasn't ideal, so to speak. But and that's also him changing his name from Jacob, Yaakov, Akbubi, trickster, to Israel, right? Which is not only wrestling with God, Kisarita Imel Vetuchal, but also Yashar El, straight. So there's that whole move where he also has to move. He himself has to mature as well. All right. You want to take this one?
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. So we're at 7 Zayin. רבי ישמעאל בנו אומר, החושך עצמו מן הדין, פורק ממנו איבה וגזל, ושבועת שווא, והגס ליבו בהוראה, שוטר רשע וגס רוח. His son, Rabbi Ishmael, would say, one who refrains from serving as a judge avoids hatred, thievery, and false oaths. One who frivolously hands down rulings is a fool, wicked, and arrogant.
Rabbi Ishmael.
Yep.
sticking it hard. Rabbi Ishmael. So we've already I think we ran into him already, but he's first of all, like we're being told over here, Bno, right? He's Rav Yossi's son, we mentioned earlier. He's the oldest of his sons, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think we saw him earlier when we were talking about the authorities, about La Malchut, and he was also known then as like a big landowner. I think you have to work for the authorities as well. And what did we say about Rav Yossi? That he was in Sipori. Yeah. So also Rav Yishmael is also in Sipori. And I think there's stories about him about being like a polymath also, which I'd love to meet a polymath, but I never met a polymath, but they sound cool.
Yeah.
Maybe people, use that term too loosely, but like, you know what I'm talking about.
You mean like a real polymath? Yeah, somebody that does everything well? Like, is that what you mean? Like everything, like they're a spets in everything? Is that
but like it's also like, they have like multiple discs spinning where they're doing like, physics and applied mathematics and quantum mechanics and like, they could do all those things. And that's really where you could have like that kind of mind that just like, has that insight. Because whatever. Anyway, I mean, we see that happening a lot with some of our sages, or so we're told. But in a certain way, the Talmud, the Gemara, is in a certain sense giving you that. It's giving you like this table that has like, the philosophy and the science of the time and the Bible of the time all mixed together in like a live conversation, which lets you be part of like this like very focused yet ADD conversation going on.
I mean, I think that's an aspect that I like about it, especially if you dig into like Tanya and then and the Torah, and like, I mean, just doing the parasha on the other hand, and then also looking at the laws, and then so it's like really various different angles, disciplines, ways of looking at things that you can kind of work through together, and it kind of gives you a better hopefully improves your perception of the world and your participation in it. That's because you're involved in all of these different things.
I agree. Unfortunately, for 2,000 years, for 2,000 years, a lot of that practice had to sort of go inwards, and there was a lot of time sort of elevating and making sure we are fully understanding, digging deeper and deeper and deeper, because we couldn't push out, right? I can't deal with the world because of anti-Semitism, pogroms, exile. So like participating in the world and manifesting my Torah is very limited. In a certain sense, like when I talk about like my Oculus, right? Like I was only wearing it at home, right? So like that's really just having a dinner party and playing. What was that game called that everyone was doing? Like we.
Yeah.
So
it was great at the tennis, yeah, for sure.
Right. So I'm just doing that at home, so to speak. But when I go out to the world, up until like even now, right? I mean, I take off my my yarmulke. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about like an individual who's working in the real world, takes off his yarmulke, or uses his English name, or has to realize that like he's not going to get those days off. In Israel right now, which is why like it's a little of an issue where the focus in many of these study halls, these religious universities, the focus is most of the day is Talmud. And in a certain sense, you're in 2023 in Jerusalem, but you're consciously moving to sending yourself back to Babylon. And while that was romantic, while I was in France or Germany or Spain, but once I'm in Israel, now it's sort of like close that book and now manifest it on the ground.
Yeah.
Like in all aspects. And this is, again, sort of the tension that Jacob and I have, because I see that happening also as well in politics. And we're not doing a good job of that. But it's, and obviously people shouldn't be closing the books. Like they should be learning, but I would say there should probably be like a focus swap on more embodied, deeper, like Tanya, for example. These are, secret to the Torah that for years, were hidden. No one was learning Tanya 100 years ago. Like you are, like online, obviously, or like Jacob doing it like off the cuff in his car. talking about like emanations, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, like we're very privileged where you can be like, yeah, you know, emanations and like, this is great learning this stuff. So
and even that takes time and I mean, because the story of the Alter Rebbe, the person that wrote the Tanya, is what was celebrated this weekend is him getting released from jail and from prison, from the Russian prison, and the way that he talks about it, and obviously the people around it, is that wasn't just a material earthly prison, but he was also being judged upstairs for releasing these ideas or talking about these ideas, and his release was a way of, okay, the verdict came in and you're good. It was a miraculous release, and the Hasidic movement redoubled, and the efforts redoubled after that. So that was,
you could see, you know, hints of this when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son leave the cave.
Right.
And obviously that also alludes to other stories at that time of like, you know, the prophet or the sage leaving the cave, right? Which is like walking out with that wisdom. First, he burns the people, right? He's like, you're not worthy of this. Or here the rabbi gets arrested. He's like, the seventh day world can contain eighth day knowledge. But then he walks out again, and then he recognizes that the guy is running with his besamim and his two hadassim, his two plants. And the guy asks him, why are you running? He's like, one is for remembering the Shabbos, one is for observing the Shabbos, keeping the Shabbos, Shamor. And then he rests because he realizes, like, in my cave or in my studies, I had these secrets, but ultimately this guy's embodying it now on the ground, running and doing it.
Right.
So I'm glad he was released. Yeah. Okay.
Let's see how we connect.
Let's see how we connect. Right. So we were just talking about Rabbi Ishmael. Hachosech atzmo min adin. Right. So this is someone hachosech, which is, today we write this with a samech. So hence, like you were reading it hachoshech, like the darkness. So you avoid being appointed as a judge. Right, like as in like not like getting away from jury duty, but you could even say that in a certain extent, but like more about you actually being the judge, so you manage to avoid it. Some people interpret this as the proper way of judging is if someone comes to you and asks you to judge, refrain from judging and demand a compromise. As in remove yourself from that scenario where you have to be the one deciding. And some of them just says like, we're talking about the parties over here in the issue. Like they decide, I go to you and I'm like, you know what, forget this. I'm just going to pay up, or I'm going to give you X amount. We don't even have to go to the judge. Let's just close this up. So we're talking about the guy that tries to avoid this. But the reason we want to avoid this is, like you mentioned, porek mimeno eva vegezel veshvuat shav. So from avoids hatred, thievery, and false oath. So the guy we were talking about earlier, the guy that's trying to avoid this, he's acknowledging basically that, you know, that human judgment is fallible and I could lead to negative consequences ultimately. And like they're mentioning it over here, I could lead to like hatred over here if I judge someone and like they're perceived unfair. So now this guy like is hating me or hating the other guy. There's, if I make a mistake, right, I could result in thievery. Right, because now the other guy that wasn't supposed to get is getting it, or what they mentioned, the false oaths over here, which are, you know, I'm being dishonest, or I'm being corrupted, or I'm needing to lie about something because I'm being pushed into a corner. Not me as the judge, but me now as one of the defendants has to come out and make this false oath because I forced him to continue on with this case, so to speak. And it's earlier in the end of the first chapter or the second chapter, we talked about how the world, right? So justice, truth, and peace, right? So you come and say like, but what are you talking about? Like, didn't we just say earlier that like this is super important? We also mentioned three other pillars that the world was talking about earlier: Torah, work, and righteous work. So there's a few pillars like we discussed. But either way, the response here that we're seeing is that yes, of course, justice is important, but on the ground, if you're too strict about this, the whole operation could fall, right? Like if you're not going to have peace that we're talking about that we want over here, if there's a tension and issues between the parties, you're not going to have justice if now theft is actually happening, and you're not going to have the truth we're talking about if the false oaths are happening. So it's yes, we want justice, but you should be very careful how you go about it and how involved you are when you get into these things, because you have to be, very particular.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the way that you mete out justice, like, I mean, the ground, the parties, the people have to be in a situation where they would accept justice, right? So you can't force something onto people. You can't also, you need to be smart about how you do it, even though it might be the right thing to do. You need to be smart about how to execute it, or and like put it out. So yeah.
All right, onwards. Ve'agas libo be'ora'ah shote rasha ve'gas ruach. One who frivolously hands down rulings is a fool, wicked, and arrogant as well. All three he gets called over here. So here we're talking about the guy who's frivolously doing this. So clearly he's doing this like this is happening like publicly, right? And he's giving down these rulings of like what he wants to be doing. And like what you were mentioning a second ago, this is where they're stressing that the Jewish law, the halacha, is values the precision and is very against like unenfold rulings, obviously. And it's really a call for like humility on your own sake, and like on you doing the proper due diligence if you're trying to pursue justice. And it's really stressing that there's like a recognition that in every judgment, no matter how small, you're still carrying this moral weight that needs to be approached with seriousness. And this also goes back to what we said earlier with mechabed kol adam, respecting every person, or that every moment has its hour. Because again, here it's talking about like the details, the individuals, the people. So like you need to be very, very careful how you go about making decisions, even if it just seems like they're fighting about like whose Pokemon cards there are.
Right.
And, and again, it's stressing that hagas libo, which is someone right now that in theory is saying like, yeah, like I'm not running away from doing the ruling. I'm very gung-ho about giving the rulings, and I'm not even going to wait. I'm just going to start talking about it off the top of my tongue, giving you what the rulings. Yeah, that's nonsense. Yeah, it's yours. Like, whoa. Did you hear the whole context? Do you know what you're talking about? Or are you just like are you being very, like we just said, what we're going to see is like obviously arrogant about it as well. So what do these mean? What do these things mean? But before I go into that, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to reflect on gas libo, on the wording as well, and on the fact that it's a rough. Gas is like an interesting word in terms of, I guess it means roughness or impreciseness or frivolous, right? It means that. So
I mean, we see it again. In the English translation doesn't do this, but we see it again at the end over here, gas ruach, right? We have gas in the beginning, and we have gas ruach in the end.
Yeah.
So we could dive into that. So first of all, why is he a fool? The reason he's a fool is because, again, the position he is taking over here is, one, he thinks he knows everything because he's just going off the cuff, just answering right now. And like only a fool thinks he knows everything. And secondly, like scholars, any good scholar, it doesn't matter what religion you're coming from, or like if you don't fail first, you can't really grow. And we're talking about someone over here again that is seemingly very sure of himself. I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to make a mistake. So there's reason to look at this guy as being very foolish. His behavior is foolish behavior.
Yeah.
The wicked is because you're allowing people to stumble, right? Because you are just thinking about yourself and you're giving these rulings right now, which we just said could be wrong. You're going to end up making other people stumble, making the wrong decision. And that obviously, once you're aware of that, then you're being wicked because you're being reckless, or like a legal team, or be like gross negligence at that point because you're aware that you don't know. Then what we're talking about, the gas ruach over here, being careful like on sensitive issues, which is where the gas ruach comes in, which is almost like spiritual issues as well, which is that your effect of just giving these answers willy-nilly ultimately can affect in the fact that you're also going to be very frivolous with your spiritual understandings as well. Like
Right.
if you didn't feel careful enough with regards to, let's say, the practical decisions you're answering about, like, yes, that plate is kosher, then when things get even more complicated, you just might be, you again, you're going to be frivolous and reckless with those spiritual issues as well.
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me a little bit of there's some kind of razor. What is it? I don't remember which
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor of like somebody assume, or I don't know if it's Occam's razor actually. I might be related, but you assume foolishness before you assume wickedness. So the person that does this hands down these rulings, you can, at least at first, you can assume they're just a fool because they think they know something, or they're just
I hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You're saying it's like it's a gradation.
Maybe, yeah, possibly. It just reminded me of that. It might all be all. I mean, it's all at once as well. But I mean, there might be like,
No, but I hear that. Like I'm saying, you're first hearing this guy speak, then you're just looking at him as a fool. As he continues speaking, he's going to end up making himself a wicked person. Which eventually, once he's done A and B, he's already in the realm of 3, which is being like already like acting frivolously and foolishly with regards to spiritual issues.
Right, because I guess it's
the decay. The decay has fully taken over.
Right, and it's part of the identity. So that's just how he behaves. So he starts behaving that. Yeah.
Okay. Mishnah Chet. You want to take it, or you want me to read it?
You can take it this one.
Okay. Have Omer, Al tiyeh dan yechidi, she'en dan yechidi ela echad, ve'al tomar kablu da'ati, she'hen rasha'in ve'lo ata. These are cute little ones this week, I see. Mm-hmm. He would also say, so Rabbi Yishmael we're talking about, do not judge on your own, for there is none qualified to judge alone, only the one. And do not say, you must accept my view, for this is the majority right, not yours. Okay, so first, the fact, just a little background to this. The fact that they're talking about over here about, well, I'm trying to think if I should get into this. Yes. Okay, so there's a question, are you even allowed to judge alone or not?
Yeah.
And there is a discussion with sages in many places, but more specifically in Masechet Sanhedrin, the Tractate of Sanhedrin, where they talk about whether you could do it with 1 or 3. This Mishnah, we're discussing it in the place where it's permitted for 1 to do. Like that's the opinion that said even 1 could judge and not 3. Mm-hmm. And even the ones that say you need 3, they too have loopholes, so to speak, when you're talking about a how would I say, a dayan mumche,
an expert
judge, or like a specialty judge dealing with like a specific thing. Then the understanding is that like this is a mind you want dealing with it. You don't necessarily need other people that are not, either there aren't or they don't know as much as he does on the subject. So that would be allowed. So that's just like a little context about like, if one would ask, but how are you even doing this? Because famously, we know that we judge with 3.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. So that was just like on that little context. So in that case where you could judge alone, we're telling you even then, whether you're an expert or whether because this is the opinion that those sages took, you shouldn't do that. You should still judge with like a full group, because it's important to let other people participate in your practice of ruling, just sort of to, as they say, mistakenly, iron sharpens iron, right? By mistakenly, I don't mean like that doesn't work, just like iron actually doesn't sharpen iron, but you know what I mean? So that's, it's an important aspect of ruling. And some look at this as saying, again, more specifically talking about the parties, which is don't give a ruling to one party alone. As in, both parties need to hear your ruling. Don't give a judgment to only one of the sides, basically, privately. It's just like I'm saying that's one interpretation, if I recall. Okay. But generally speaking, it's more of the main line, which is try to avoid doing it yourself, because earlier we were saying don't be a judge at all, right? Try to get out of it. If you can't get out of it, like we said, do the compromise. Now, if you can't get out of it, then don't do it alone. Bring people on with you. One, because you want to sort of spread out the exposure, so to speak. Two, because you want to make sure that you're not in an echo chamber, right? Like if you're speaking, someone's be like, wait, that's your process? Like, what are you talking about, right? So you want to be able to course correct. So that's why it's important. She'ein dan yachid, ela echad. And in English, it was like, for there's only one, right? So we're saying over here that the one we're talking about over here is obviously God. So this is like a beautiful, humble acknowledgement that, God is the ultimate authority of judgment. So just like generally speaking, even before we're saying you can't judge as one, because we're saying you could in theory judge as one, it's just saying, remember, God is the ultimate judge. But the oneness of God and our oneness is obviously different, because like we have many like internal components of intellect and emotion and imagination, and each one of these aspects of us could have conflicted influences on us, right? So like, yes, I'm a single individual, but there's, so to speak, like a storm going on inside. And that's why it's just important to remember that not only that God is one, but it's also in a certain sense like a more it's like a deeper philosophical hint of you also have to realize about yourself that like even though you're one, you aren't unified yet.
Right. It's the infallibility. You just need to recognize your infallibility,
which is our strength in a certain sense, right? Like it's great that I could play around with emotions and things like that. But when God tells Moses also, Mani rachum afatar rachum, like just like I'm merciful, you'll be merciful, right? These attributes that we could take on that somehow resemble God, in a certain sense they do, and in another sense, in God they're all united, they're all one, and by us these things are fragmented, and hence could leave us to get to false verdicts. Ve'al tomar kablu da'ati shehen rasha'in ve'lo ata, right? And do not say you must accept my view, for this is the majority's right, and not yours. So one is sort of obvious. Don't use your position. Don't use your authority, so to speak, to have your ruling being accepted. Don't Harvey Weinstein this kind of situation over here and create like apply pressure, not sexual pressure, but apply pressure over here to get what you want done. Because the Torah is obviously stressing over here the respect of, let's say, the communal consensus, the process of how we make these decisions. And that's also the English translation is stressing that as well, which is ultimately it goes according to the majority. This is also a clear line that's like, warning you against like, authoritarianism and stressing the concept again of humility. Once it was like just being humble by knowing that God is the ultimate judge, and two is recognizing that like ultimately it also goes according to the majority. So the majority rules, whatever in any version or mechanism majority means. I understand obviously that's different in every country, but the point still stands. And like also you were mentioning earlier that it's also a general statement about the whole aspect of being judged. Like, yes, we are electing to be part of this system, whether it's a secular court or a religious court, but the parties don't have to agree with what the judge says, right? They just have to follow his ruling. So like, he can't demand the acceptance of his opinion. He can only demand the compliance of his decision, right? So like that has to be enforced, but you shouldn't, like the judge shouldn't be like, if he's walking out not agreeing with me, then like I failed, I'm going to keep on pressing. Like you have to know where to do that split, or you can't enforce your reality on someone.
Right. I mean, that's kind of like you can think of it classically in terms of you would have the ruling party. I mean, I just remember this from civics in Israel. You have the party that rules, and you have the party that executes. I think there's an
Harashut mevatzat, harashut.
Yeah, I think there are terms for this in English. I just can't remember.
Right.
Remember that. But yeah, so it's like it's also there's a separation between who does the who gives away the verdict and who performs the verdict or makes sure that it goes into action.
In general, I'm just saying this is reminding me of just like the critiques of like people have with rabbis, because like, you know, how do you accept the rabbi's authority, right? Forget just the majority, but just in general, like a rabbi saying like, you need to accept my opinion or my authority. So like, this is a very big debate. How much of this today is due to fear? How much of this is due to like status about these things sort of developing? However, I would say as someone that does like want to see reform, in the academic circles, there's like a sense of, let's say, calling Rabbi Akiva, the famous Rabbi Akiva, they call him Akiva.
Mm-hmm.
Just Akiva. And the idea is like that sort of brings them closer to him. They're talking to him like, you know, they're not using these terms of someone that's biased as like rabbi, but just like, you know, he's a guy and he has his own opinion, and then we could critique him on that level. Mm-hmm. And in a certain sense, like if you did call him rabbi and you took the time to understand his teachings and his mindset, I would say then you would maybe have, you know, be in a position to give valid critiques. But it's almost like people either deconstruct completely and be like, this happened 1,000 years ago and it doesn't matter what this guy was saying, or completely deify and being like, we can never change what this person said. So like, I think you got to sort of walk that line. It's because I see him at such a high regard that allows me to criticize him, because I know him intimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's also taking in just the right context in which that person lived and where he's like his perspective. Because if you're taking away an aspect of his identity, then you're you'd be bound to misrepresent what he's saying because you don't understand the position that he held amongst people and stuff like that.
All right. Number 9. Rabbi Yonatan. Oh, he's a cool dude. Omer. I'm sorry?
You want me to go for it?
Oh, I'll read it. You can take the English if you want. כל המקיים את התורה מעוני, סופו לקיימה מאושר. וכל המבטל את התורה מאושר, סופו לבטלה מעוני.
So Rabbi Jonathan would say, whoever fulfills the Torah in poverty will ultimately fulfill it in wealth. And whoever neglects the Torah in wealth will ultimately neglect it in poverty.
Right. So, well, it's very fitting for Rabbi Yonatan to be speaking about this, because Rabbi Yonatan was a student of Rabbi Ishmael, the other Rabbi Ishmael, not the Rabbi Ishmael we just spoke about. Okay. I'm 90% sure about that right now. 95% sure about that. But Rabbi Ishmael would say, I think we mentioned this in the past, Dibra HaTorah Bilshon Bnei Adam.
Yeah.
There's different interpretation of this, which is the Torah speaks in the language of men. There are some that interpret this as saying that the Torah is speaking sort of for the humans of its time, and that's why it should be interpreted that way, and you shouldn't necessarily dig in too deep. There are some that interpret it saying that, no, it speaks in the language of men, of all men at that time. And Maimonides, for example, says that man at that time is already aware of, you know, the Egyptians are already aware of like very deep astronomical ideas and thoughts and mathematics. And like, that's why like anything that man is aware of during that time is fair game as far as Maimonides is concerned. So when he says the Torah speaks in the language of man, all knowledge that's accessible for man at that time is up for grabs, which is like a much wider net, so to speak. But either way, the reason I mention this is because here you can see we're talking about someone starting poor and being rich, or being rich and ending poor, and then we have to think how literal do we take this, basically. So I thought just that's interesting. So the interpretation on these lines are such that well, the first line, Kol mekayem et Torah me'oni sofo lekayem me'osher, whoever's starting off poor will end up being wealthy. So one is really, in a certain sense, that you're starting off from like a real poor position. You're physically poor, but it's in a certain sense being poor. That bug didn't distract you, and it ended up turning into like a feature. And because like it didn't distract you, we're saying that God wants to now give you like sustenance because because that's what's going to require you to continue to uphold the Torah, right? So it's sort of like this loop sort of thing that as long as like you get past the distraction of being poor, then you reach that threshold where now God will miraculously make you rich, so to speak. However, we'll have to see if reality, offers such options. There's now a different interpretation, which is people that are committing to the Torah in poor times, so to speak, as in not that I'm physically poor, but I'm down on my luck right now. I'm depressed right now. I've gone through like a horrible ordeal. So that's when it's very difficult for me. And if you work hard in those times and you muster the proper connection and faith in those trying times, when you're wealthy, and by wealthy, I mean the wealthy times, right? When you are now back on your feet and everything's looking okay, then it allows you to apply and appreciate that Torah much more.
Right. I guess that was when you read it at first, that was kind of my first. That was what I initially thought it was. It meant
you're trained well. It's not because it's not just magically becoming rich.
Yeah, right.
It is.
Yeah. Especially and obviously the second part kind of touches on that as well, and you can feel that in terms of like it's like a convenience. It's like if you do that out of convenience, that I think we kind of already touched on that in one of the last Mishnahs right here. I don't know where exactly, but that if you do something out of like when it's easy, you do it, or you don't do it that as much, then obviously when it's really hard, you're not going to be able
right.
to.
We talked about doing the mitzvah kala, right? Which is doing the easy mitzvah. Then we spoke about it that like the easy ones are the ones that are not in your day-to-day routine. We spoke about the easy ones are the ones that you have the opportunity to do right in front of you. Someone might take it from you, but yes, but like you were talking about, it's also how much effort you put inside. Do it while it's easy now, because when it's difficult, it's harder then. Now in there's like let's say the classic interpretations, which would be like, we're talking about wealth in the world to come. Right. So we're not promising. No, we're not making any promises over here right now. You might end up being poor, but in the world to come, you're going to have it. And no, it's not Maimonides, but there's an interpretation that like, it's not like a poor, like you're not physically poor and you're not poor times, but rather you're starting from a poor intellectual position. And as you learn more, you will gain more knowledge, wealth in that way. And like now you will learn Torah from a more wealthy intellectual perspective.
Right.
And obviously that is like a huge benefit. Now on the flip side, so obviously like someone that is neglecting the Torah, like it's while he's wealthy is clearly showing like a lack of genuine commitment, right? Like when times are easy and you're like and you're forgoing this, it's obviously an issue which could lead ultimately to like a spiritual decline, like we said about, like we spoke about the fool, the wicked, and the gas ruach here too. Like these things can lead you to have an issue. And this also, I think it's an interesting distinction over here, because with poor people or poor individuals, they're focusing on like the practical or like abstract aspects, and that's what like sort of what drives them is like this existential needs, and they have like this spiritual thirst because they have nothing else going on, right? So they need to be connected, they need to be practical about these things because it's do or die, and they need this sort of to survive.
Yeah.
However, like a wealthy person, he has a luxury, so to speak, to like explore more nuanced halachic discussions, but that lacks sort of spiritual motivation. And when he's rich, if he neglects that, he might have had like this in-depth, like nuanced halachic discussion, but if he didn't spend the time really engaging on the more practical and like abstract aspects, he's not going to have enough of that spiritual fuel, so to speak, to keep going.
Right, because he's just sustaining on the material, on the kind of the day to day.
Correct, and the poor person needs like the real to keep himself alive.
Right, because he doesn't have a lot.
Because he doesn't have a lot, exactly.
Right. So maybe he can help me place this pattern as well. So because in one way you can be, so let's say there is a person that is wealthy, meaning they do it okay in life, and they don't seem like they need anything spiritual. They don't. Maybe we're talking about the same thing, but I'm just trying to talk about it. But they don't seem like they need anything else. So they get into some existential mode where they realize something as like it's not the material maybe is not enough to sustain them, and actually that becomes part of their downfall. But that is where they find the meaning, right? That is where they get their spirit from.
Well, so, we're talking about like a U-shaped journey, right? So like
a little bit, right? Yeah,
I'm dropping down. The attitude is over here is like when you're in your wealthy position, right? Mm-hmm. If you stay the course, you're not going to dip down, right? Like as long as you keep feeding yourself your spiritual stuff, then you should be hunky dory. The poor person could rise back up. If he drops back down, he has the tools to not fall as far back down as he was before.
Right. Yeah. And I guess this kind of relates to the beginning of our conversation, where if you are wealthy and you neglect, you might think, okay, maybe it'll be a U-shaped story where I can deconstruct, I can like figure out what I need, and then maybe I'll get up out of that. But that journey will still have its consequences on you. Like it would create some kind of chaos in your life in one way or another. So it's a dangerous thing to do. So it's better if you do it while you're up. Like did you can sustain that?
Yeah. In theory, it starts with Kol Mekayem et Torah Me'oni. Everyone's starting in theory from zero, right? When you're born. Right. So the sense is also here, like you're starting from this point. You're already going to give yourself the tools you need to then stay in the wealthy place and not have to dip back down. But there's also a sense of here when they use such a term like sofo, right? Ultimately or eventually, right? So like when is this, right? Because you could see that there's people that are born poor and die poor, born rich and die rich, and like when did their eventual thing happen? So this is in a certain sense also like alluding to I'm sure you've heard this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So basically, we're saying that like you should study. We talk about the study of Torah or doing good deeds. That you should do it like from insincere motives, because ultimately, practicing that pattern will turn into sincere motivation. Yeah. So here too, the eventually is again, this is like in a classic. Chazal and Chazal's, the rabbi's fashion is, you don't even see the butterfly effect or the ripple effect of what your actions have, even if they're in theory currently insincere. So we know that as like there's a story about in Judges, Ehud ben Gerah, he comes into Eglon's palace. The way he gets in on being detected, he's left-handed, and he hides his weapon on the left, and the guard only checks his right. So very lax security, if you ask me. He's giving this attack plan. He's like, they're never gonna guess. I'm just gonna move it. To my left. So, anyways, he goes in. It's maybe it was even a double-edged sword, I believe. So he goes, sees Eglon, and he tells Eglon that I came to speak in the name of God. And Eglon stands up. Ultimately, Ehud stabs him. The Bible uses I don't know what the word is in English. In Hebrew, it's called parshadona. All his fat comes out, and he dies. But he dies in private, in a respectful manner, as in that no one had to see him die that way, because he stood up to God's name, right? And then the sages say that he didn't even realize that showing that little amount of respect, right? That even if he had his own ulterior motives personally, there was a ripple effect of that, which is ultimately his descendant is Ruth, and Ruth is Ruth's descendant is David, and that's down to the Messiah, right? So we have an attitude again where like the eventually is the Bible and the Torah have a very marathon, long haul view of the world, and God tells Moses that you can't see my face, you're only going to see my back. The sense is like it's all happening in retrospect, and there's a long story down the line that you need to be looking at.
Yeah.
And reading those patterns, of course.
Cool.
I think we'll stop here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Good. Next week is the Festival of Lights.
It is the Festival of Lights.
Is there a reason that we're not doing this, or?
No, I think Monday. Yeah, I think it should be good.
To all watching,
I
hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, I'm sorry. If there's something I said that offended you, I don't know. Grow thicker skin, and as always,
reach out for a conversation.
Or reach out for a conversation. Yeah, I don't know why I was so. Yeah, you're right. First, we can talk it out. But again, thank you for joining, and we will see you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chasi.
My pleasure. Thank you.